Well, welcome everyone to the August edition of Vue.DC. Topic is getting ready for Vue 3. As you can see on our left here, we have our new sort of Vue.DC sticker that Tracey helped to design. So we're looking forward to giving those out whenever we see everyone in person again, which will probably be 2040, but life goes on. Anyhow, for those who are new, who haven't met us before, so I'm Ben Hong on the Cypress team and one of the co-organizers, and I guess we'll go down from left to right. Tracey, you're up.
Oh, hi, I'm Tracey Holinka, and I work for Bloomberg Industry Group.
Hi, I'm Christian Guirreri. I work for Politico.
Hey, y'all. I'm Jack Koppa. I also work for Politico.
Great. All right. So as far as updates go, as you may have heard Tracey earlier, we now have 991 members. So we are getting close, breaking that 1,000. Pretty exciting.
So close.
Kind of hard to believe that our first meetup was back in December 6th of 2017. And proud to say we've had at least one meetup ever since. And for as long as in-person events are difficult, we will continue to host these online the third Wednesday of every month. And yeah, so it's a little bit of background on Vue.DC for those who are new. So for those who might not have used Zoom before, you may notice that, whoa, all right. You may notice that on the bottom here, there's basically a toolbar. Basically in the chat window, you can go ahead and send stuff directly to the panelists, which is the four of us. And then you can also raise your hand. And we offer also the Q&A option as well, so that this can basically be something that you share a question with the entire group. And that's what we recommend, because then you can like upvote them and people can upvote your question. And this way we can sort of centralize everything at once. So if you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A section. All right. Right. So all of you start unmuted and Q&A passion. Great. Yeah, I totally forgot we had a slide for this. All right. Great. As far as support, so be sure to check out our site, vuedc.io. There you can basically find links to the various community resources we have. If you want to join our Discord channel, it's just vuedc.io/discord. And then you can go ahead and join. We're in there pretty often, trying to answer questions as people have them. So if you ever find that VueLend, which is the main Vue Discord, is really noisy and it's hard to get some attention, be sure to join us in our Discord. And as most of you have found this group, you should be aware that our meetup.com username is Vue-DC. So be sure to join us to get the latest updates on what's coming up next. And you can find us on Twitter as well and YouTube. So thanks to Tracey for getting us that vanity handle. As far as upcoming meetups, next month for September, we have HTML email with Vue.js featuring our very own Tracey Holinka. So be very exciting for those who have worked with HTML email before. I know I can tell you it's extremely painful. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what Tracey's been cooking up at work. And then as well in October 21st, we'll be having our Intro to Vue.js workshop, but we'll be focusing this hopefully by then on basically Vue 3 content. So even Vue 2 veterans, if you want to come by, we'll basically be teaching Vue from the ground up, so you can see some of the new changes and those sort of things. So be sure to keep that bookmarked. We really need a vanity URL for this. But yeah. If you do want to apply for any talks, Chris or Jackie or Tracey, if you don't mind dropping that in the Zoom chat. We're always looking for people to come speak, so you can either email us directly at vuejsdc@gmail.com or fill out the form that we post in the Zoom chat. Oh, wait. This can't. Oh, wait. Is it time? Is it right?
It's time.
All right. It's time.
And the winner is...
Dun, 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 dun.
Third Eye!
Oh, nice job,
Who is Third Eye? Who is Third Eye?
I have no idea.
All right. I grabbed screenshots for our records, which we are keeping for... well, I guess we have images at the end, but Tracey came up with this excellent new logo, and we also got stickers at the perfect time to get stickers. When there's no one to give stickers to.
I was just so excited about the logo. That's why we got stickers.
But for as long as you're playing with us and you'll eventually join us in person, please stick with the same username, and then you can claim all your stickers once we have in-person meetings sometime in 2023.
And we have T-shirts and other things that we collected. It's just that, we can't do anything about it right now. So anyway, okay, so
nice
back
work,
to you, Ben. All right. So,
Yeah,
good
sounds
job.
All
Pretty
right.
impressive.
Let's dive into Vue 3. All right. So, for those who don't know, Vue 3 recently got its release candidate, I think maybe a month ago by this point. And so the Vue 3 docs are also out at v3.vue.js.org. And so we've been sort of iterating and getting feedback. So we figured it's probably time as we move towards closer and closer to production release that we start talking about some of the changes coming and just getting some feedback from people or having, for people who have questions. So with all that said, let's get started with the first thing that is probably the most, changes that people will be most familiar with. So as far as the first one, we have multiple root nodes. So for this, it has some screenshots. If you had this in your template, where you have your image block, I don't know about you, but any of you here, but I've done this multiple times where I just had a bunch of sibling children next to it. And next thing you know, you get this error, right? And it's like, it requires one element, like exactly one element. And the thing is that going forward, basically, we no longer have to wrap everything in a div, and we can actually just go ahead and render out siblings like that together. So I guess the first thing is, so what do you all think about this? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely still make this mistake, especially like if you're just copying and pasting code like into a Vue file, and it's such an easy thing to make, and I just think it's absolutely brilliant. Like it's something everybody's wanted, and I know that having a single root node has been a great like best practice for making your components very specific. But there are definitely times where you have to do this. And I know in our case, we ended up having to do some major hacks to make something happen, by going through a functional component and that sort of thing. And so it's just I think that we should still be teaching best practices, and having a single root is good. But like there are definitely times when you need to do this, especially in larger systems.
Yeah, I when I first started doing Vue, I was really annoyed by this because I find I'm just like so anti-div unless you need a div, and I just felt like you got all these extra divs, and it just has driven me crazy from day one of using Vue. So I understand your point, but sometimes, like for me, I'm looking because I come more from the front end, I'm looking from the markup perspective, and I just can't stand all these extra divs. They drive me crazy. And it's actually kind of really important if you're going to use something like Grid 3 and CSS is Grid, CSS3 is Grid, and when you work it with the Windows like IE 11, like it doesn't do you have to be really careful. The parent-child relationship is really important, so all these extra divs can really get in the way.
Tracey, the secret is you drop IE 11 support and you don't have to worry about it anymore.
If Mike Bloomberg says we can, then we can do it.
if we could.
Even Politico, I think, supports IE 11, right?
We need it for pro.
No, we definitely do. There was an extremely annoying clickbait article that I saw come up on Reddit, which was that Microsoft was dropping support for IE 11. They even gave a date, which was, I think, April 17th, 2021, which felt crazy soon. But when you read any part of the article, all it is that Microsoft Teams, the Slack equivalent, is dropping support for IE 11. So it's like one specific thing in Microsoft won't be supporting IE 11.
I unfortunately found a document a couple years ago that says it's like 2024, 2025, they officially drop support.
Yeah.
It's
until it's until the last OS with it. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, so I see some comments in the chat about how people don't like wrapping everything with a dummy element. Yeah, this is definitely one of the artifacts from, I think, early frameworks. So this is not specific to Vue. For those of you other frameworks like React, same thing. We were all wrapping in single root elements, which gave definitely div pollution to a lot of our websites. So one of the caveats though that comes with this, actually, I'm curious, there's a caveat that comes with using this though. So another word for those wondering is this is also called fragments. So Jack, what do you think this caveat is now that we no longer have a single root node?
It's what I'm mildly worried about, which is that when you're using a child component and you want to apply something to it, like an attribute or a class, which is something we do really commonly, it's no longer as obvious it's no longer super obvious what should happen to that class in the generated HTML.
Yeah, and to be actually even more specific, Vue actually has no idea what to do with it because you have a bunch of sibling. So basically, when you use fragment, it's basically important to bind your listeners and your attributes explicitly to the parts that care about whatever you want it to. So this does make component design just a smidge more complex. But I think anyone opting into using fragments with multi-root nodes will eventually learn to do this. But that is one little caveat that we get out of not having a single root node.
That's actually something I don't know yet, Ben, which is so Vue 3 allows for any component to have fragments like this, which is great. If a component does have a single root node, is it the same default behavior it had been, or does everything have to have explicit binding?
As far as I'm aware, single root nodes will still automatically inherit your listeners and your, specifically the attributes. I think listeners, there are a couple. But generally speaking, yes, it'll work exactly as you're used to in Vue 2. It's just the moment you leave that paradigm, that's when you'll need to be manual.
Yeah. I think that kind of upgrade path or migration path is a really nice and developer-friendly experience where you get the benefit of being able to do something like you have in the screenshot now, which I think, as people in the comments are saying, is a pattern we often want to be able to do. But you don't lose the way that we've gotten used to potentially interacting with our child components, which is great.
Right. Let's see, there's a question in the chat. So, Tracey, you want to read that question?
Okay. Is it that thanks to the name fragments, it's now getting closer and closer to CSS, the best language? I agree with whoever said that.
I believe the name fragments is borrowed from the React community. I think they were the first ones to really call it that. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's where I think I first saw it popularized. But we also call it multi-root component as well. So I don't think we've really settled on one over the other. But that's why I wanted to present it, because I've heard it talked about both ways.
Yeah, I've heard both ways too. So
yeah.
Yeah, CSS partials. I think of fragments. I think of Apollo or GraphQL. GraphQL uses fragments. Yeah. So.
Cool. Does anyone have any sort of questions regarding the multi-root node fragments topic?
And I also mentioned this in the chat, but feel free to at any point just click the raise hand button if you'd like to ask anything over audio. Otherwise, you can ask in chat or with the Q&A feature. But we'd love to hear your voices if you have anything to contribute over audio.
Yes, definitely. Since we can't see you in person.
All right. All right. So the second one, no more filters. So for those who joined us a couple meetups ago, this was one of those questions regarding one of the things being deprecated. And so let's talk filters. This will be easier. So I'm going to have to do some live coding because of the screenshots. More than a thing. Okay. So for those who are familiar with Vue 2's filters, basically when you had a property, so let me blow this up a lot. Whoop.
It's a little too much. Yeah, that's good right there.
So if you had something like the sort of like total amount, for example, one of the most popular uses for filters is that you would have a pipe symbol and then you would basically say currency. So this would basically convert something that was, this would have something that initially was like 4403 and then convert that over to like $4403. So you would determine basically what styles were applied directly to it. And so, a lot of times, so there was a bit of confusion when it came to filters because technically there's nothing stopping us from creating a method called like format currency and then just passing in this data property to do the same thing. And so there's basically like, which one makes more sense. And basically, if you look at the design spec, the reason for this basically is that the pipe operator actually is going to be possibly has other uses when it comes to JavaScript in the future as far as the spec goes. So Vue, as much as humanly possible, tries to keep it just JavaScript and not interfere with what you already know or will learn in the future. So as a result, it made more sense to deprecate the filter functionality rather than to try to backport it and create this sort of special functionality. So going forward, if you want to format, just go ahead and add a method on your data property, and then you'll get the same effect. So, ideas. Thoughts?
Someone says I always use method or computed props.
Yep. Yeah, I think for a lot of people that was more explicit because the pipe was like a very specific symbol you had to learn.
I remember briefly seeing, I think it was pipes in AngularJS, which obviously has some Vue similarities. Where there was a lot of let's pass a model through something so that it gets output the way we want it to, kind of trying to separate logic concerns of a component with just display things. So I think there's probably some people who I would imagine felt like this idea of separating out, this is only for display. But I would agree with most people in the chat, which is that like we're already using computed properties and methods for this. I don't think we have any pipes in our code base.
Yep.
Yeah, I got rid when I heard. I think it was in the first Vue conference. They talked about getting rid of filters and mixins, and so ever since then, we haven't pulled all the mixins out of our code. But I thought we were getting rid of it, so I've been pushing everybody to pull mixins out of the code, which is actually a good thing. I guess she'll talk about that, and then or maybe whatever. And when you get to the composition API, but filters we've been pulling out, and I've successfully pulled all but a few filters out. So yeah. But I found it better just to have it in a regular JavaScript file, like a module, and I can use it everywhere. So.
Yep. Agreed. Cool. Any thoughts, Chris, before we?
Nope.
Okay, so
didn't really ever use filters that much, honestly. So yeah.
You and Robert Tanley.
Well, so it looks like let's see, pipe operator proposal. Okay, got it. So yeah, Robert had a great comment about filters. So yeah, so as far as like my experience with filters, Chris probably is the only one here who's seen this app, but like one of my first Vue apps I ever built, I definitely used the filter to like format things. So I was like, oh, cool, I could do this thing that's clever. But ever since then, yeah, it's been mostly computer properties and methods for me.
I think in my first Vue.DC talk, I used filters for sure. Yeah, but that was a long time ago.
We are going to shame you. We are going to shame you.
Oh gosh, I use Event Bus. That is my real shame for my first Vue app. Just thinking I was so smart
Event Bus has its places. So,
yeah, what Jack posted is definitely the thing that Evan was, I think, concerned
referencing. About. Yeah, I would say that's probably a bigger motivator than anything else.
Yeah.
For getting rid of filters.
It's good that they're looking in the future, right? Like they could easily just leave it in now and not worry about it, but to know that it's probably going to happen, that's a good thing. Keeping it in fun.
All right. Well, with that, let's jump on to the next topic, reactivity caveats. So, all right, I'm going to quiz y'all. So when it comes to reactivity, what reactivity caveats are you most familiar with when it comes to Vue?
I'm going to try to avoid answering unless I have to.
Just watching what you're writing here first.
I'm just setting some stuff up so that we can talk about it.
I will. I'll volunteer.
Okay, go ahead.
As tribute, when adding, basically, I'll give a cop-out answer, which is adding properties to objects that were not there at the time that the component was initialized, and some form of adding elements to arrays. There are cases where the thing that you've added is not reactive.
Right. Yeah. We've got people in chat saying modifying array elements.
Yes, thank you.
Also mutating properties of an object. Yeah. So.
Yeah. All right. So I think the best way to do this, to demonstrate to everyone, in case you hadn't dealt with it yet because I know while as developers, a lot of us would like to ideally just jump immediately to oh right, where did I do that Beetle thing? Crud. Sorry, hang on one sec. I imported it somewhere. Oh, views that. Oh, it's in my router. That's what I get. All right, here we go. Bye bye. Okay. So a lot of us still are working in Vue 2, and we won't be able to upgrade immediately. So basically, we have a list. So everyone basically who has commented is basically correct. So there are two things. So we have, let's say, a list that is empty. Actually, let's just give this a thing, and let's give this person a name, and we'll call it Tony Stark. Great. So now if we go inside of our template block, and let's go ahead and render these things. So we have our list, and we have our person. All right, so here we go. So let me blow this up a bit. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a button, and it's just going to have a method that says update data. Very, very generic, but that's fine because we're going to just use that one button to illustrate everything. Okay. So let's just verify everything works. So hello. All right. So we click. We should see. Oh no. Hold up.
Wait.
What? Oh, it did work. It did work. Sorry.
It's old.
The reload had the error before it was too fast for me. Okay. So here we have this property. So again, let's say let's start with arrays. We want to replace the first element, right? So typically what you would think to do, right? Because again, we're like, oh, it's JavaScript. We would go this dot list dot, and then the first item, and we're going to replace it with 1, 2, 3. That's what we want to do. And you'll notice that right now, if you click, nothing's happening. And that's because there's an exception with basically the reactivity. And so to what people were mentioning in the chat, you have to use a set method in order to do it. And so similarly, right now, actually, if you do want to change the person's name, so we just name this to Stephen Rogers, you'll see that this does actually update. So you can update an existing property, as you might expect. But to Jack's point, if we go ahead and want to throw on a new property, and we say 321, for example, this won't do anything. Nope. So these are basically, and so, again, we talked about, so I believe push will not work either. So list.push 4. Oh, this one. Oh, right, push is different. I forgot.
Yeah, push and pop, yeah.
Right, push pop. But in Vue 3, you will be able to do it just like that, as you would expect. So those reactivity caveats disappear. And we no longer have to do that like view.set, and people won't have to go to Stack Overflow to figure out why their code isn't changing anymore.
Magic.
It's all magic.
Yeah, if there's IE11 support, I believe there should be polyfills for the reactivity, and there may even be some limitations. But as far as like Vue 3, for evergreen browsers, you will not have that limitation anymore. So,
speaking of IE11, Ben, I think that one of the reasons we haven't gone to like full release is because IE11's not in yet. I haven't been reading. Like, is there anything the latest on that?
I haven't heard anything specific to the IE11 updates.
Like, is it possible that they'll just release anyway because it was too hard?
Unlikely, I would think. But again, I wouldn't say by no means am I the official final say on that.
Yeah.
But
I was just curious if you heard anything.
Yeah, no, nothing yet.
Ben, from documentation, or actually, let's go to this. Let's go to this question from Robert real quick. Didn't know about this limitation. Did that also previously apply to Vuex state getters? And if so, will the fix apply to Vuex 3?
Yeah. So as far as Vuex state and getters, I think typically because when you're using Vuex, you're returning a brand new like array object every time. So through that state. I think as far as I'm aware, I haven't run into caveats there. Because normally you would have to you'll copy the state and then you'll update it, then you'll return the new state in Vuex. So I don't know. I'm curious what the rest of the panel has to say about that one. Have you ever ran into these?
That sounds right. Like I feel like I've definitely run into less reactivity problems with Vuex in place.
Yeah, because at that point you're cloning. Usually you're cloning the list and then you're doing stuff to it and then returning that new one. So typically you don't run into it. But I will say I have tried to mutate, I think, the state directly before and then ran into it. And then I had to remember to clone.
Oh, right.
Clone the list.
Yep.
Because the idea of Vuex is really like you're supposed to be returning like new pieces of state every time rather than modifying an existing one. So I think for that reason, Robert, you would probably run into it less. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then as far as Vuex 3, technically it's 4 right now. So Vuex 4, it should receive the same reactivity updates because it'll be using Vue 3 internally. I will say from what I understand, Vuex 5 is probably what most of us will be looking forward to. I believe there are some API changes coming. Specifically, and I know Chris Fritz has talked about this for a long time, hopefully to the point where we can automatically detect when you're trying to execute mutations so that you don't have to write a mutation and an action. So basically everything will be actions and it'll detect when you're actually trying to do mutation. But again, that's more on that when they have the release. But I know there's a lot of discussion around that. So fingers crossed that they figure out a way to do that.
I just looked through our largest Vue code base and verified that there's nothing in our Vuex code that ever uses anything like set. It's just in our components.
Sounds right to me. We have a joke from, I'll call it Magic Cat.
Magic Cat, yeah.
Saying we should do the Angular 4 move and just everything. Gosh, that won't like make anyone panic. And we're just like, everyone, Vue 5's release. Here we go.
We're done.
But anyhow. So yeah, that's the reactivity caveat piece.
Ben, my one question was going to be from a docs perspective. Did that, you mentioned the Stack Overflow questions that people end up there trying to figure out why something wasn't updating. Did that end up being, do you know if that ended up being a point of focus or frustration for the Vue team itself to kind of have to justify or explain this behavior? Or did it get to kind of a static point where eventually developers just got used to this particular limitation and kind of knew it?
Yeah, because at the time, I think it was too much of a breaking change because the reactivity system just wasn't, as far as I understood, like I think there was just a straight up technical limitation from how the reactivity was working internally. Yeah. So that's why it's not like they ever pushed out like a minor version to fix that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think people just accepted the status quo and went from there.
Nice.
Cool. Any other questions regarding reactivity caveats? All right, this is going to be a big one. So let's talk composition API.
No, let's just skip it. I don't think anyone.
Let's just skip it. Yeah, no one needs to know this one.
Yeah.
So who wants to take? Who would like to sort of give their take on what the composition API is?
So I haven't really played with it that much. I focused on vModel, which I know you'll talk about later, and obviously and the double root. But I always heard it talked as a replacement for, instead of using mixins, which are still there, that composition API is a better way to go.
Yeah, I like it's hooks. So no questions. All right, we're good.
Yeah, exactly.
A brief summary of why I'm excited about it, which is maybe not particularly focused on what it actually is, but the problems that it solves, which is that in Vue, because of the way Vue 2 works, there's a fair amount of Vue-specific magic, I would call it, about blending things together on a component instance. So when you write a computed property, and you're able to access that in the template or in other parts of your component script code, and you're not accessing it as a method, you're accessing it just as a property, there's some Vue magic that goes into saying, yep, that's available as just a property and not a method. And when you have Mixin, which provides maybe some methods and some computed properties, there is some Vue magic that says, let's take all the mixins and then make sure those things are available on the component instance so that if anything else in the component tries to call those mixins, it will just work. And so in a lot of ways, that's really nice because those things, quote unquote, just work in a Vue component. But what I think the Vue team acknowledged and what we've experienced certainly in our code bases at Politico is that it makes code reusability a little bit harder and a little bit trickier because it's a little harder to predict the way those Vue-specific things are going to work, especially in terms of things like IDE support, and in our case, TypeScript is the big thing that we're excited about, because those things, essentially, they're not working as just JavaScript, that they're working under the assumption that Vue is going to do some magic so that at runtime things work together. So without looking at the way that the composition API actually works, it's I see it as a way to have a more JavaScripty approach to setting up your components, so that you can call methods, you can call things that are like hooks to provide one bit of functionality that's shared across a number of components, and then provide another little bit of functionality, and to be able to easily navigate those with both TypeScript and IDE support. And then at the end, you just return the values that you're interested in for your component, which is what allows TypeScript to work super well in this case, is that the thing that you're returning is no longer a magic Vue object. It is just an object with a very TypeScript understandable set of behaviors. So I think that's, again, without looking too much at the specifics, which hopefully Ben will do a better job of demoing, that's one of the things we're really excited about, is it's hopefully going to make code reuse easier across larger projects by making it more predictable.
Yeah, so Dan S says in the chat, composition API makes components more functional as opposed to configured.
Great. And we actually have a question about whether mixins are actually deprecated. So
that caused such a problem, didn't I?
I don't think it was just you. I think there was good I think there was enough rumors and stuff about the talks of that. But as far as I'm aware.
See, I swear that the first Vue conference, I swear, you said that they were going to get rid of mixins. Like, maybe I dreamt it. I don't know.
As far as I'm aware, I haven't documented anything to say otherwise. Basically, while mixins I know get a bad rap, it still is basically a way to refactor your object-based API into different files. Now, again, it can be used very poorly, and it has namespace trouble. Like, there are certainly a lot of drawbacks with it. But then this is where I'd also say, like, composition API, on the flip side, while it gives us a lot of power and flexibility, this also means, just like mixins, it can also be, it still requires developers to be disciplined in how they use it for it to be useful.
Yeah, there's a section called drawbacks in the link that I just posted, and people should read that. It goes through it pretty thoroughly, and things that they're thinking about on changing to make it better.
And so the most obvious question, for those that might not have been following the threads as much, is, does the composition API replace the object API?
No. I'm glad at least one person.
Yet.
I'm glad at least one person got a chance to respond before I did. No, it's purely additive.
Yes, purely additive. That is a big thing to take away from this. People are still more than encouraged to keep using it and using the object API as they always have. And then, just like any other technique we have in Vue, whether it's slots, scope slots, when you need it and you feel like you have a problem, then you're more than welcome to reach out for it to enhance your code base. But otherwise, yes, please do not feel like, oh, this means I have to rewrite everything in composition API. 100% cannot. Do not have to do that. And to Dan S's point, yes, for those in 2.x who want to start using the composition API, there is an actual composition API plugin that's actually being supported. I believe Sarah Drasner is going to have a course talking about this on front-end masters at some point. So I'll drop this in the show, or not show notes. Oh,
there's actually I didn't know this. There's a compile time flag in Vue 3 where you can drop the code that's used in 2x and reduce the library size.
Right, tree shaking in Vue 3 is going to be much better.
Yeah, if you know you're only going to use the composition API, you can actually reduce your bundle. That's cool.
This is a great question from Magic Cat. Is the plugin stable safe to start using in prod? I would still caution against it. It's one of those like use at your own risk. I wouldn't give a blanket statement of approval, but I know there are people who have been using it and been really happy with it. So use at your own discretion. Cool. So does anyone else have like Tracey, Chris, you want to weigh in on what your thoughts on the composition API?
Do you want to give your own rants?
Yeah, what your own take is on it?
I don't have a rant to give. I think Jack spoke to most of the things that I've been thinking about, and I think TypeScript is going to be is definitely a big boost for us. I've never loved mixins. I do like that they're pretty damn simple. But yeah, the stuff that's in the composition API is definitely well worth integrating. And I think just keeping in mind these drawbacks is what I'm going to be watching.
What about you, Tracey?
I haven't really played with that much, and so we use GraphQL on Apollo client, and that combination, there's a lot of, and we don't use Vue.js. Like there's a lot of things that other apps will run into that we just bypass, just kind of by our stack. We had some mixins in there. None of us are really big fans of it, so we pretty much took all of it except for one out. One of the biggest problems I found with mixins is troubleshooting when there are problems. And I understand I don't have the experience, but I understand the composition API is supposed to be a bit easier to troubleshoot problems. So that would be the biggest thing I'd be happy with, but I really haven't really played with it. So.
Okay. Well, in that case, I think it'll be easiest to do a little bit of a demo. Yeah, this will do. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new file. Whoa, that's not what I wanted. Okay, so this is going to be another one. I'm just going to save it. Components. We'll call this, C comp.view, whatever. It's not going to be rendered anyways. Okay, so let me move this out of my way. Okay, so here, the way I like to think and explain the composition API, what everyone said is accurate as far as its approach to trying to be give you more flexibility, hook into things, and reusability. All those things are true. And for those who haven't necessarily read up or haven't played with it much, I really like to think of the composition API as a way to basically give you access to low-level Vue API. And so when we say object API, again, for those who aren't as familiar, we have things like data computed methods. These are like very specific things that do very, things that we like, they're organized specifically by how their usage is. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take this script block and we're going to rewrite it using the composition API just to show what I mean by exposing that low level. So the first things first is that we expose a new, basically, call it lifecycle hook, which is basically the setup function. And so this is what you're going to get here. And so inside of this is where you basically get to do a lot of your setup as far as like creating your data and what you want to expose ultimately. Because if you look back at here, this is basically saying, let's expose these data properties. Name is going to be a reactive property that watches this string. ID watches this number, inventory this array, ability this object. Same here, inside of this computed property, we say this, first name is a computed property that's based on this. So we start to that's how it all works. But what we want to do ultimately with the composition API is allow us to do things in sort of organize things more as features. So for example, let's say we want to make something reactive. One of the new things you'll see is that this kind of syntax is going to become very popular, where you're going to see people importing a specific package from Vue. This speaks to Vue 3's tree shakeability in terms of being able to detect what you're using and what you're not. So for example, not that many people are probably using the transition API when it comes to Vue. They might not be animating anything. So when it comes to your final build, you don't need that. You don't need to be sending that to your users. So with Vue 3's tree shakeability, you can just basically drop it. So in this case, ref allows you to create a reactive. Whoa, what did I do? Oh no, hotkeys for the. Oh, my hotkeys just borked everything. Here we go. So ref allows you to think of it as creating a reference to a reactive variable. This unfortunately is a little bit similar to the ref you might be used to when you're putting on DOM elements, but when you're seeing ref in this context, think of it as reactive reference. And so if we're setting up our data store on the left manually, it would look something like this. So we have const name, again, plain JavaScript. And what we're saying is we're going to add a ref, and it's going to be Tony Stark. And then we have our ID, which is a ref of 1, 2, 3. And cons, inventory, which is a ref with an array. And then abilities, we'll talk about. Actually, I might as well mention it now. When it comes to abilities, there is a separate reactive property that allows you to then make reactive objects. So again, this is what I'm saying when it comes to you are being exposed to low-level things.
You have to be explicit.
I see what Jack says. It is more JavaScripty.
Yes, it's 100%.
Just the setup alone. The setup alone, right?
Right. And then on top of that, you're returning what you want to expose. So we're returning name, we're returning ID, inventory. And I believe abilities needs to be returned slightly differently than this. So don't quote me on this code example. But you can see here that this here is what you would have to do to get the equivalent of this. And so just to take it just one step further, if you want to use computed variables, well, then you have to import computed, because again, what composition API is about is allowing you that ability to actually oh gosh, I currently forgot the syntax.
I think it's an arrow function.
Yeah. Yeah, so then it'll return, name dot split name dot that's the other thing. I'll explain that in a second.
Yeah, the value.
Yep. God, this is this is why I think it's important for people to understand this. Okay, so now we have basically coded up this side, the data and the computed, and this is how it looks at the end. And so for most of you, you're probably thinking the left is very declarative. This is easy to read, and this is very nice. And so for something as simple as this, I would agree. I would say just stick with the object API. There's a lot of setup here, because as you'll also notice, you might be wondering about this value thing. This is something that is specific to the ref, because when you create a pointer to a primitive, such as a string, you need to be able to unwrap it. And so when you unwrap it, you use it by pointing to .value. Yes, and so to Jack's point, there is a lot of setup when you're using setup. But again, there's a lot of power into this as well, because again, you basically allow yourself to group functionality together. Because while this looks like one-to-one, very easily mapped, you can envision that if we started mixing up things that theme mode, and we're dark, and you start mixing up your data store, it gets really spread out amongst your code, your components. And so one of the things the composition API does well is allow you to group sort of a similar scoped code into a way that's sort of easier to follow, if that makes sense. So setup design look like React context with ref and plain parse. Yeah, yeah, there certainly are similarities when we're taking a look. And so as people, like a lot of people are like, oh, this looks just like React, for example. I know people were complaining about that at first, but again, if we're looking at this, when you say it looks like React, we're really saying this is JavaScript. And when people are like, oh, well, like, in Vue 2, we weren't like that. But in Vue 2, plenty of people write render functions that use JSX. So if you want to be like that looks very React-y too. And for me, again, even though I love Vue, I think it's important that we keep learning, like the frameworks keep learning from one another. Everyone has good ideas, and the more we can do to help push the web forward, I'm all for it. So yeah, so I guess, and the other thing, so this is the other thing too, because change name is just a method, there's nothing special about that, right? Because methods is just saying it's a JavaScript function. So change name, the equivalent is just a function. That's all it is. So name dot value equals. Oh, why would I set it the same thing twice? Whatever. Okay. Cool. Thoughts? This is like, again, there's a lot more to unpack and wrap, but I just wanted, I wanted to explain it at least in this way. I don't know if that's helpful to panelists, people watching.
I like it. I like the class structure. I remember when class API was also on the list, and it all just feels like familiar territory when you're looking at like really early JavaScript class structure things. So I'm a big fan.
And so just to provide a little bit more context in terms of how you would ingest this if you were in your component. So you would add the setup, and you would basically, this is not totally accurate. This should be like comp.js, and because we're technically exporting a function, but basically you would refer to it here. So just bear with me. This is a little bit not accurate, but we would basically say use, again, so I called it comp, right? So you're basically calling the function to execute setup, which will return all of this stuff. So inside of setup, you would basically say, hey, I want to pull this piece in. Remember, like in this case, if we're only interested in the name, and then you would expose it to the rest of your component via name. And so as you can see, it's already yelling at me here, but like this should not be the case. I'll just call its full name. This is how that maps.
Yep.
Is that you ingest it inside of setup and then expose it manually. So again, the big thing here is to understanding that this this is about giving you a lot of control and power, but this also means there's a bit of a learning curve too, because now a lot of the magic that Vue used to do for you, now you get to have full control of that, which it's a double-edged sword.
Just to highlight a little bit, and we don't need to harp on mixins too much, but the difference here would be that you could do something like on the right as a mixin, say you want all your components to be able to have name available to them. So you could do something like that now as a mixin. It's just that when you import that thing into a component, the fact that name exists now isn't known at compile time or IDE time. Which is what makes things hard with TypeScript and mixins, versus what Ben showed using the composition API. Now you're simply returning an object. And so you can just use that function and you're returning an object, which is equally understandable by JavaScript and VS Code and by TypeScript. And so that's, I think that does a really good job of highlighting part of what we're excited about with the way that this can be used to share code better.
Yep. And so to Jack's point, we can rename all this stuff too. So if we don't, I forgot the syntax now, but it's like as blar name, whatever. I forgot the alias already. But you can re-alias things, and it's very clear where everything's coming from. So this is some of the things that it escapes from mixins. Whereas here, I just give a very quick example of comp mixin, where I pulled out like data, computed methods. You have no control over what is named in here. Like it's just going to get injected into your component. And so Chris Fritz had a great example, but mixins, again, still have a lot of use. For example, if you have a really big component that you're not necessarily ready to refactor, You can do small refactors by just having mixins for that component. So just breaking up that functionality and only importing those mixins into that one component. And that's a way for you to at least organize your thoughts and then at least prevent your components from being too crazy. So that I thought was always very clever when he talked about like the one case where mixin is very, very useful for Object API, the Koppa method.
Strong beliefs, any. Love it. Strong beliefs typed loosely is also pretty good.
It's typed loosely.
Okay, let's see how we're doing time-wise. Okay, so we have a little bit of time. Okay. So any other sort of questions, comments on the composition API? I imagine we're going to have full-blown workshops and talks on this, to be totally honest. So for those looking to get more practice, we'll be sure to queue up that content for you. But
I could say I used it on a very small, just internal fun project for us, and it works. It takes some getting used to, and I certainly was spending each component plenty of extra time just thinking about, okay, how would I do this? And it's also this would not be a standard use case for using the composition API because this is very small. It only has 6 components or something like that. But it's neat to see it in practice and neat to be able to get used to that syntax so that you have it available when it feels like it is a good fit.
So, Ben, we have a question from Paul. Is it possible to customize what ref considers a change value? For example, deep equals?
I feel like I need more context. What ref considers a change. Are you saying that like whether or not we can actually like make name.value like a different string, or are you referring to what are you referring to? Does anyone else understand? I feel like I'm missing. What am I trying to deep equal?
Sure, Paul. Just of how a ref determines, given that it's reactive, when that value has changed.
Is this a type question? Okay.
No problem, Paul.
No worries.
Okay. Yep.
Looks like it uses double. Okay, yeah. So hopefully, Paul, we can get some context on that later. So we have a question from Robert.
At least a comment about using React hooks in a code base. So it sounds like from Robert, I think it could be a similar experience of getting used to writing things this way, but I also think it's neat in the same way that React provides class components as an approach. Vue obviously provides the options API and the composition API, and so I imagine, especially at the outset, that most Vue 3 code bases would be a healthy mix. Yeah,
and again, I can't overemphasize this. Like it's one of those things where I know a lot of people are going to want a lot of practice with it, but there's nothing inherently wrong with the Object API. There's a reason it's been very powerful and useful for people. And so I would caution people to use it as an enhancement to their workflow rather than like the default. Because then you also, to be honest, you are increasing some basically code contributing barriers for people joining your code base if you suddenly do everything in composition API, for example. But one thing that I know that
Magic Cat needs to stop spreading disinformation.
But I will say that one of the things the composition API will expose people to, which would be very nice, is because we're allowed to basically manually inject reactive data properties and stuff. This means that shared state becomes a change game, basically, because the composition API can take place for some things you might rely on Vuex for at one point. Because rather than make something like your theme mode, like a global thing you have to track in Vuex, that can be something that's just injected and tracked to the components that care about it. You don't need to track that on like a global store, for example. So it'll definitely open up some very interesting use cases for sure. Cool. I prefer the HOC. Yep. Let me see the fragmentation in the Vue code on Hoop tutorial. As far as fragmentation, again, as far as the docs team is concerned, we are planning on supporting composition API and teaching it as an additive thing. So it's not going to be, you should, at least as far as we're concerned, you should never see us going like, hey, just get started with Vue, learn the composition API. Like that's not the case at all. So as far as I'm concerned, I have no intention of making that fragmentation. All right, cool. Couple more things. The teleport. Who here knows about teleport? And what that is?
I have no idea what this is. Jack knows. Chris? So what is it, Ben?
Nothing. Go ahead, Jack. What do you
got?
Jack?
Oh, just that it's the new name for portals.
Yes.
So ways to send code to mysterious places to do the code things in other places.
Yeah, I'm not gonna do. I can't remember the exact syntax.
Oh, that would be so much. Yeah.
I was muted. Sorry, I was saying all kinds of things.
Oh no, good. Chris, say the things.
Say the things.
Modals, portals. Yes.
Yeah. Say the things. Say the things.
I just did. It's all good.
So again, this is pseudocode. Don't quote me on this. I haven't played with teleport a lot. But if you imagine your app.vue component, if you have like a modal, like where a place where you want to, inject code basically, I'm just gonna call it target, modal. This means that inside of another component, for whatever reason, if the logic exists down here, instead of like in the old days, you had to send a huge event up to the top, you could basically go like, hey, this p tag where I'm saying like lorem ipsum, I am going to wrap it, I believe it's in a teleport. And then I would say, oh, I think I actually screwed that up a little bit.
Target, yeah.
Yeah, so I think the target goes on the teleport. And then, again, just for sake of mental model, this is just going to be called destination.
Yeah.
So it'll send this thing all the way into here.
That is awesome.
So, yeah, I like this explanation by Magic Cat, which is Portal is basically allocating a part of your DOM tree that you can send components to from anywhere. Yeah, I like that. Wayne Gretzky, Michaels. Cool. Okay, so that's just the high level on teleport. I don't want to speak too much on this one.
Why is it called teleport now?
So because, as Jack had mentioned before, we're trying to be future-facing, and it is possible there actually will be a native portal in the actual HTML spec. So rather than have the risk of conflicting with native HTML, we are going with teleport instead. Now that I'm seeing destination, oh wait, hold on, no, ignore the short. This has nothing to do with shorthands. I meant that as like an ID. Let me just ignore this. It's nothing to do unless it's okay. Sounds good. Whereas emit, yeah. So to Brian's point, yeah, if you're using emit, you have to do, and so this is why people use event bus back then, is because sometimes you just needed to like send it to like your great parent, and you need to like let them know that something changed. Like, this would basically allow you to circumvent that. Great, yeah.
So now I can get rid of all my event buses. The few that I have.
Did Linus Borg build teleport? He built I believe a portal plugin. So actually, I think similarly, I think you can actually use it in Vue 2 and play around with it. I have not. As you can see from my lack of understanding of the syntax, I haven't played around with it that much, but I do understand the basics of it. Okay. So, how are we doing on time?
So.
Yeah. Okay, 2 plugin. Great. Okay. So hopefully that gives you a better idea of what this teleport thing is coming down the pipe. And so the other one I just mentioned offhand, it is not in the slides. Suspense is another one you're going to hear from people talking about. As far as I'm aware, thus far, that will not come out with the initial release of Vue 3, but it is a feature that will come. And
I was looking forward to Suspense. That was like one of my favorite little things.
Yeah, so it's I would say, as far as I'm aware, it's coming. It just might not be in like the initial release.
Yeah.
So for that reason, we're not going to talk about it, but I want to talk about things that are very specific to what people will most likely be impacted.
Suspense.
Yeah, suspense will be good though. So more on that when the time comes. So the last thing is the V model changes. Tracey, you seem very excited about this. Do you want to talk a little bit about it?
Well, okay, so I just learned a little bit about it, but basically you could have multiple V models in a component, and in the past you couldn't, and you had to wrap, like, we have preference forms, and you just have to wrap this gigantic object. That's the way you can use it, because you can't have multiple V models. So the thing is that you can have like multiple V models, and you don't have to have these big objects that you're wrapping. And if it only has a couple things in there, it's no big deal. But we have some that just really are a lot of stuff in there, and it's really hard to read it, understand what's going on, to troubleshoot, to do anything with it. So
yeah. So Jack, Chris, do you have any thoughts on the V model API change?
Tried it out briefly and liked it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, nothing specific, no.
So just go ahead.
It works.
It works, that's right.
It works well. It works well. And the main thing is for readability, I swear. That's the biggest thing for me.
Yeah. So just to give people a quick overview of what's changing, 2.x, we are used to using V model and pointing to a specific property, and which is shorthand for basically breaking this down into like, V bind value, and on input, basically, update this thing. And basically, as Tracey and everyone has mentioned, when you want to do this for multiple things, it was basically not possible, and it was just really weird and hacky. And so in V3, basically, rather than sort of having you tie it only to one, so if you use V model by itself, just like this, it will go ahead and assign it this default value of model value. This is its like baseline, what it unpacks to. But V model basically now is able to receive an argument. So similar to we expect for like V bind, the attribute, or V on the listener. Now V model is like argument, which is the prop that we like, the property we want to keep track of. And then this then allows us to do multiple V models, as everyone has mentioned. And so it just creates this for a more ergonomic use of V model, which is, so I think that's the highest. I want to go into that kind of high level. And so we have some explanation here on the Vue 3 migration guide. But if something's confusing, please let us know, and we're happy to clarify.
So another big thing, which is the adders, the changes. I don't know if you were going to talk about that, but that's a breaking change, right?
Adders change a bit.
The listeners are in the adders now. Like you don't have a separate like class, style, and the listeners are all packaged now, part of the adders, right?
Yeah, correct. I don't think we're considering that a breaking change, because I think everything's still. For most people, it will work, but it's just like you just have to be a bit more. Yeah. So, the coercion strategy here. Wait, no, this is okay. So sorry, we're starting to dive into really deep territory, but safe to say we have a whole migration guide. This is one of the things I didn't want to surface. So if people do really want to dive into the differences with Vue 2 and Vue 3, please check out the migration guide. There's a question from Magic Cat regarding migration tool taking care of majority of the breaking changes. At this time, I can't speak to the state of the migration tool, but I certainly know that's something the team would love to be able to provide the community. So, as I have updates, I would be happy to share them. But as of right now, I'm not aware of the state. I know we're working. Cool. All right. And the only other thing, I think, before we wrap up, where are we? Oh, yeah, right here. So for those who are like, okay, like I want to try out Vue 3, it was actually kind of complicated up to this point to do it. And so if you didn't know, basically in the most recent release of Vue CLI, if you do a create app, the Vue create, it will actually give you a new option now for a Vue 3 preview that already has the Webpack and stuff. So currently the dev tools and stuff are also in progress. And so we'll have more on that as it gets built. But
so I have a quick question before we go over to Jack. So what about like server-side rendering, all the other components? Like server-side rendering. I tried to find out if they have an updates, because that needs to be account for the Like it doesn't work now with Vue 3. I've tried it. So like, do you know what some of the other more popular dependencies or plugins or whatever you want to call them are going to be updated?
I believe server-side rendering is getting an update. So that's, I think, as far as I'm aware. But certainly those things are at least in the queue, from what I understand.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I haven't published anything because you can't install it. Okay. All right.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
And one last question. Somebody did ask, I don't know if you said, but when's the actual release?
Yes.
Do we know?
No, there's no official release date.
Give us a date and time, Ben.
I want to be there.
A day of the week.
I mean, they've been talking about Vue 3 for a while, so, you know.
We do at least have a release candidate now, and there are Vue 3 docs, so we are definitely closer than ever.
I think it's release 5 right now. Is that something like that, right?
Release candidate?
I think so.
Yeah, I think it's release
RC5.
candidate 5, yeah. Mm-hmm. So they're getting there.
I promise you, the moment we have a formal date, y'all will hear about it. I promise. I know we all know people are itching to hear. So
yeah. Okay. Awesome.
Cool. All right. With that, I think we have a second round of trivia.
One maybe.
The Silk.
Could it be Silk? Get it.
Yeah.
Silk, sir.
That's fantastic.
Nice.
And G Money.
All right.
Makes number
Grab that
4.
screenshot.
Yeah. Nice,
All
Chris.
right. Fantastically done, everyone. I'm going to stop screen sharing.
Sounds good.
Very good.
All right.
Congrats, everyone.
Well, with that, I think that ends our Vue 3 discussion. Hope people found this interesting, and thanks everyone for participating. Any final thoughts from the rest of the panel before we wrap up?
Vue 3.
Wait, I found the do a 180. Hold on. All right, it's in chat. Do a 180. It's great. So watch that.
All right. So
I'm really looking forward to it when it comes out, especially there's a lot of good things they've done. So yeah.
Well, I look forward to seeing you all hopefully for next month's September talk with Tracey, where we're talking about using Vue inside of HTML emails, which to me is just like
I don't know if anyone's had this experience, but every time I've been asked because I'm a front end developer, they come to me. I'm like, the web and email, two different things.
Very
But this like blew my mind away, and I no longer hate HTML and email. I do not hate it. It's just amazing. So definitely it's going to make you not dread every time somebody asks you to do something with email. So
tell your friends.
Awesome.
Tracy doesn't hate HTML email, so we better have 200 people at this.
I mean, I don't know about you all, but anyone who's ever been asked to do it, you're just
honestly. Yeah, that's great.
So,
Just a reminder, we need 9 people before the next event.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So that we can,
Glad we're not hosting it. Otherwise, it's canceled.
and let's be honest, we need like 12 people because we usually lose like a few people.
Sure. Yeah, Vue 3 dropped that one.
All right. Well, with that, thank you everyone for joining us this month, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks for leading us, Ben.
All right.
Yeah, thanks,
Talk to y'all
Ben.
later.
Thanks for all your work on the docs team.
You're welcome.
See y'all soon.
All right. Bye.